what I'm finding is there's a lot of people who are so identifying with their stories and so identifying with their roles that they never really grow and bring maturity into their characters and build some real depth into their characters. So they're absolutely wonderful at parrot fashioning whatever they've learned and playing the roles, but when you dig behind, when you dig beyond the surface, what you find is just quite a lot of the times a real scared boy or girl underneath it all, who has been using these different masks and these different faces to navigate through life, and as such they never really find the happiness that they're looking for, because they're always meeting other people with their masks on who are there, obviously meeting them with their roles as well, and we fall in love with all these different roles, and then we wonder why the masks, when they slip, we're not happy with that particular person. So we're in a sense destined to repeat these patterns until we stop and really take stock of our lives, like really look at what it is that we actually want. And that basically means sometimes confronting some very uncomfortable emotions, confronting some stories that are there, some patterns which may or may not be ours. And by sitting with that uncomfortableness, we can, if we take our time, let those go. And what that does is it builds a real depth, and it builds a real character into the individual. And what then occurs is that they start relying on themselves more and more. And this is the beginning of this inward journey. This is this beginning of realization, of empowerment as well. When we start realizing that my role, my story, my background, my identity, my color, my creed doesn't really define me. What defines me is who I truly am. And as we start digging into and really plumbing the depths of our existence and why we do what we do, what we find is that we start seeing more of what we actually are, and we can let go of more what we aren't. So in a sense, self-inquiry. And that self-inquiry allows us to build some maturity into our characters and really build some emotional intelligence, and realize that emotions and thoughts and feelings are always going to be here and they will always pass. So instead of our knee-jerk fight or flight reactions that have been conditioned into us through a millennia, we can actually take our time and stop and really look at the situation and deal with any situation in our life in a calm and patient and very relaxed manner. And yet it's something that's not happening. It's very simple to do, to sit with yourself, and yet it's not happening. And I think one of the reasons for that is because of the way the educational system has taught us to look outwards for a solution. Our peer groups, our families, our conditioning tells us that everything is outside ourselves. And because everything is outside ourselves, we're always chasing for that next experience, that next thing that's going to finally make us happy. And it never really does. So, how do we start undoing that conditioning, and undoing this idea that you are not your story, you are not the job that you are working, you are not your family's, you're not your family's conditioning or your family's story, and really start living from a place of authenticity in which we discover who we are. And that is simply by sometimes just stopping and taking stock of our lives and really being honest with ourselves. I tend to say to a lot of people, the lies we tell other people are bad, but the lies that we're telling ourselves are absolutely, absolutely brutal. And one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves is that we are this identity, we are this story. And what we do is we literally take what we truly are and bound it over. And that invariably creates that agitation, because we're using then a very limited way of living. And that limited way of living, what it does is it just never really allows us to actually live, and it always creates this panic or this anxiety. And yet, if we were to sit with this uncomfortableness, we may see that the situation is as bad as we believe it to be. And yes, it can be uncomfortable at times, but if we take our time with it, if we really just are patient and good to ourselves, what we may find is that after a while, a lot of things start dropping away as we go inwards. And as we start going inwards, we start really inquiring into what our true nature is. Are we really this name, this identity, this story, this job that we're working? And we can then find what it is that we really want. Maybe we don't need to accumulate wealth. Maybe we don't need the status that we think we need. Maybe we really don't need that toy. And ask yourself, I mean, if you need these things, are they really needed? I remember once being asked by a young man at a talk, I asked him what did he want, to which he replied, I want £1 million. To which I remember shooting back an answer of, well, you have no need for £1 million. And sometimes it allows us to look at even what we're striving for and what we're aiming for in life, and is it really what we want, or is it something that's been put into us via a pattern through our families? Example, I'm a first generation immigrant, I suppose. I think that's the right term, I'm not quite sure. So my father came to this country, and obviously I'm the first generation from that. And what I tend to find is the immigrant communities, we're very focused on accumulating wealth, and we're very focused on education. And a lot of people will just go through their lives, accumulating wealth and accumulating education. You see most of them, they're actually quite, sad characters. But there's this pattern there that probably has absolutely nothing to do with them. That's just running away in the background, dictating who their life is. And if they were to just stop, what they may find is that they could identify these patterns. What that then does is, as we go further and further, we develop this sense of trust. And we develop this sense of trust in the most important thing in the world, which is us. And as I said, that leads to this empowerment and this emotional maturity, because then when we have these thoughts, coming through, we don't have to readily identify with these thoughts. We don't have to readily identify with these emotions. As a Sufi said, this too shall pass. And as we start seeing that most of these thoughts really aren't us, or most of these emotions that we're feeling, or most of these feelings that we are feeling may not actually be coming from us, and it could be something else altogether, we can readily start letting them go. And we come to this point of equanimity almost, where we start realizing the transient nature of these thoughts and these feelings and these emotions, that they're always going to pass. And that builds a real depth into our character and a real maturity into our character as we start relying more and more on who we truly are. For many years I was seeking, and I was, sitting with teachers from the Sufi schools and, non-duality teachers and pretty much anybody from any tradition that I thought could give me an answer. But what I was doing was I was giving my power out to these people. Now, what's really subtle here in giving your power out to these people is that there was, in some part of you, a decision being made. So even with subconsciously, to give this power out. And if we take that, if we look at where that is coming from, we'll realize it's programming, an educational system that tells us that our answer is outside ourselves, which is why we have authority, and which is why most of us are going through life quite disempowered, because of a pattern that was just put in us, which had nothing actually to do with us. And then we wonder why we're suffering, because we're really not acknowledging our actual true nature, which is free, which is expansive, which is this reality that simply is occurring in every instant. So as we really start trusting ourselves, we really start developing this sense of maturity, we start realizing that I then don't have to look for the answer outside myself. The answer could be within myself. Going back to what I was just saying previously about sitting with all these teachers, it was when I really got radically honest with myself and said, I actually want to know what this teacher knows. That's when a lot of this idea of seeking just dropped away. What was then left was just really trying to figure out, I suppose, how I was going to get to this holy land. And the funny thing is, the Holy Land led me back to myself. So now, yes, I take advice. Yes, and I'm not saying don't take advice or anything. Yes, I take advice, and yes, I listen to other people. But I realize that ultimately, the reaction is happening with me, in me. The information is being processed within me. We hear what we want to hear, and I realize that really the center and the answer and everything that I really need is right here. When we realize that, what's beautiful is that deepens as well, and we become more and more trusting. We realize that we're doing things that we didn't even think we could possibly do, simply for the fact that we are relying on who we truly are. And with what's currently going on in the world, it's probably the best way to be navigating ourselves through what's going on, which is by relying on who we truly are. So to build that maturity and to really become emotionally intelligent, start inquiring into the nature of who you feel you actually really are, who you truly are, who you think you are, who you believe yourself to be. And it's almost scientific, because it's something that can just come up as and how it needs to come up. I'm not saying sit there and then start writing out lists. Just allow it to naturally occur. And what you'll find is, as I said, you will start seeing more and more of who you truly are, and more and more and less of who you truly aren't. And that builds that maturity and gives us that level of emotional intelligence that we need to navigate, through this existence called life.